So my name is John. Hi, everyone. I organize this group, Sit Heads Meditation Club. And I don't think we have anyone new, but just in case, I'll give the very brief intro and maybe for Martine's benefit as well, even though she's heard this stuff. Sit Heads is a sitting and social group for people interested in deep meditation practice. Everything we do is free and donation-based. For anyone who wants to hang out with us, we are at sit-heads.com. We do not have a set teacher here in Sit Heads, but we do have visiting teachers join us from time to time, like Martine. First, I want to introduce the wonderful Martine Batchelor. Martine spent 10 years as a Buddhist nun, if I think I have that right, in Korea under the Son or Korean Zen master Kusan, where she engaged in extensive practice of Hwadu, or what we more commonly think of, maybe not quite correctly, as koan practice or meditative questioning. After Master Kusan died, Martine returned to lay life and to Europe, where she studied Theravada and Vipassana practice as well. Martine's the author of numerous books and articles on Buddhism, meditation, Dharma, and in recent years, she's taken a particular interest in the topic of feeling tones or valence or affective tones, or Vedana, and has written and taught fairly extensively, including in academic contexts, on that topic. So that is the wonderful Martine Batchelor. So before we start, normally we do a little conversation first, but since we only have an hour with you, Martine, I might just cut to the Q&A if that's okay. And if there's a pause where folks don't have questions, then I do have questions that I am eager to ask you. Does that all sound all right? Okay.
Yeah, it's totally fine for me.
Terrific. So let's go nuts and start getting some questions to Martine. But before we do that, I mean, start putting up your hands or whatever. But Martine, do you have anything that you'd like to say before we get started with the Q&A?
No, let's go to the Q&A.
All right, excellent.
Any question, comments, anything they want to say or ask or whatever it is.
All right, people, let it rip.
So Liz.
Hi there. Thanks for coming to talk to us. I hope this doesn't seem to be too pedestrian a question, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about having a partner who also meditates. My partner does not, although my best friend does. He's actually in this group and he's helping me learn. So he's my partner. Maybe you could just talk generally about the concept of even partnerships in meditation, whether they're conventional marriages or not.
Yes, I think in a way, if it works out that way, then the two people who are partnering together, sharing their lives, sharing their space, might be into meditation together. But I mean, they might not be in meditation in the same way. Again, you can have somebody. With my husband, we both in meditation, we both meditation teacher, but he preferred to sit like 45 to an hour, and I prefer to sit 30 minutes. So sometimes we sit 45, sometimes 30 minutes. And then like I have not been well, so I have not joined him, and then he sits on his own, and when I'm well, I'll join him. So we are kind of like very not organized about it. And then you have, people who do it together, and it's a discipline, and it's part of partnering, being together. And other type of friendship or partner, the person is not interested. I had a friend like that. She was so into meditation, and her husband was so not into meditation. So when she went on retreat, he went on writing kind of a detective novel training. And so they each have their different interests, but they had enough in common that it would work together. What is difficult when you have somebody who actually has to hide to practice, that's what's tricky. Like I had a friend long ago, and when she wanted to practice, she had to go in the attic because the partner really did not like it. So I think it's a whole range. Personally, I think what is helpful if both accept you have either similar or different interests, and how can you be accepting if the interest is harmless and beneficial. And so I think it's kind of like how to, because sometimes the person feels, oh, you are not supporting me. Or sometimes, especially if you meditate for hours, the person is thinking, well, they kind of really leaving me and they don't care for me or whatever. So we have to see that each person needs different things. And if it's harmless and beneficial, then we accept harmoniously one's different choices. After that, if one is in a place where there can be a sangha, a community, and you can sit with others, then that's very helpful, especially at the beginning, especially if you find it supportive. Like I have a friend, I mean, this is the only person I know who is like this. He loves to sit on his own. Once he came on our retreat, and he thought, too many people, I can't meditate, although we were in silence. So for me, it was very interesting to see somebody who actually preferred to sit on his own than to sit with others. But most of the time, a lot of people, of course, prefer to share this with others. So if you have a good friend you can share it with, then that can be wonderful. So I think it's kind of like, what are our circumstances? And nowadays we can do this online. So we don't feel, I think what is important, we don't feel alone in our practice and we feel supported. But we have to be careful to think the person I live with, the person I'm partnered with must also do this. If it's really not their thing, then I think one cannot impose it. Even if you think it would be good for them, you cannot impose it. And maybe they have their own way of helping themselves out.
Thank you so very much. That's wonderful.
Anything else?
Thanks, Liz.
Noah.
This is sort of my perennial question, and I sort of go around and around. And so on one hand, I feel like I know the answer, but on the other hand, I still suffer. So I'm autistic. And so sensory input for me has a lot of negative feeling tone. And yet I tried to disregard that. And so when it's 5 o'clock and the neighbor starts playing heavy metal music, I think it's just sound. It shouldn't bother me. And then 30 minutes later, I'm like, and so why, should I use every opportunity to practice, or should I put my noise canceling headphones on as soon as I start to hear the music? What do I do?
I would actually creatively engage with your conditions. And I found what is very interesting, once a lady wrote to me through my website, and she said that actually she was autistic and she was practicing Zen. And what was interesting was that she loved Zen because it was very quiet, there was dim lighting, it was in silence, everybody moved slowly. And I had never looked at the practice in that way. And I thought, but yes, for people who have this kind of difficulty, it would be excellent. And some other retreat who might be more noisy and with more bright light, then of course, that would not be so helpful. So here, personally, I think in a way, each of us have a limit. So sometimes we can go above the limit. But generally our limit is like a kind of what I would call caring health. So each of us have different kind of, like at the moment I have a lumbago and I can now sit for about an hour on this chair. But a week ago, I could not even sit on a chair. I just have to lie down most of the time. So in a way, we have to see that we have from the nervous system. So at times you don't need the thing on your ears because it's very calm and quiet and might be just a bird sound. Then that's fine. And then all the time you will be tired and possibly even the bird sound will be a little kind of too much. And then you will put things on your ears. But I would say anytime you hear your neighbor music, I would put the thing on the ears because in a way, we have to be careful. We are not practicing regardless. We have to see that we are a flow of inner condition meeting outer condition. So it's not just about regardless of whatever, I must be inner condition working on that. No, you have to see both. What are the circumstances that help me and how can I help myself so that my system doesn't get too enervated? And at the same time, when you feel relatively calm, then you can push a little the boundary just as an experiment. But personally, I don't think that you need to push these boundaries. I think it's just what suits me. How does this help me? I think that's what you really have to look at because it's not regardless of circumstances. So I would go for the thing on the ears.
Thank you. That was incredibly helpful.
Thank you.
Martine, oh, actually, no, never mind. I have a question coming in, but it's still a work in progress. So if there are other people who have something they want to ask, that would be great. And then if not, just call on me.
Okay, let's go for John.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, me? So here, let me spotlight myself. Yeah, so I'm curious about your recent sort of deep dive, in recent years into the question of Vedana, which has already been touched on a little bit, this idea of feeling tone. Just for anyone who doesn't know, Vedana refers more or less to the experience of pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant that accompanies each moment of experience. And I'm curious, for Vipassana practitioners, how do you feel that we might be overlooking the role of Vedana, or how do you think that in the way Vipassana is currently taught, Vedana, how do you think Vedana should be taught in the context, or mindfulness of Vedana should be taught in the context of Vipassana or Satipatthana practice? What do you think we're missing and what should we be doing?
Okay, personally, I'm not keen on should, but personally, why did I become interested in it was because I could see that people would go on retreat, long retreat, 7-day retreat in silence, and they would generally benefit from it and generally have some calm and clarity, some meditative experience, some insight. So in a way, people had no problem with meditation and meditation retreat. Most of the time, it was helpful for most people. But then when I talked with the people in interviews, it was obvious that there was a little kind of stickiness with the habits. So then I become interested in the mental habit, emotional habit, physical habit, relationship habits. And then I realized, hey, what we actually reacting to is a tonality. So that in a way, the habit is kind of like reactivity to tonality. But then I saw that in terms of the teaching, I mean, things are changing and lots of people are also talking about Vedana, but I thought that often when it's looking at the conditionality, you have contact, tonality, and then you have grasping. And generally people jump to grasping very fast. So the problem is Vedana, but the bigger problem is grasping. So let's get to grasping. But then personally, once I understood what Vedana was about, because one of the problems with Vedana, especially when you sit in meditation with tonality, is the fact that generally it's very neutral. It's neither. So the Buddha suggests that there is pleasant tonality, +1 to +10, unpleasant tonality, -1 to -10. And then there is what he called neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And it took me a long time to become aware of Vedana because I would be looking for them and I did not find anything until I found most of the time when you sit, or I sat, it was fairly neither. And then I realized that that tonality was actually very interesting. And often people don't talk about that tonality. And again, it's kind of put to the side and then everybody kind of in a way discuss, is it just kind of like indifference? Is it kind of like there is nothing? Is it that it's equanimity? I mean, there are different ideas about that one. But then I found that it was very interesting tonality. And then when I read more text about tonality, the Buddha said, I mean, such interesting thing about tonality. You have lots of quotes, lots of passages, which are really fascinating. And one of the main one is what is called the 108 Vedana. And then here, the Buddha shows that he really was a great observer, explorer of Vedana, of tonality, because he could see that you don't just have pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You have the one which is ordinary. You have the one which is insightful. You have the one connected to past, present, future. You have the one connected to, I mean, it's very interesting. And then I realized that this is very connected to our reactivity because the Buddha said the difficulty with Vedana is that we have this underlying tendency toward them. So this is totally connected with the habits. And also what I found interesting about the whole mindfulness movement is that I would say that there is, it's what's very interesting in a few passages, the Buddha talks about ordinary tonality and tonality experience with insight, which you could say without grasping. And then if you sit in meditation, either you can be aware of the tonality of contact when you hear something, taste something, see something, etc. Or you can be aware of the tonality of the mindfulness itself. And if the mindfulness is caring and careful, is samasati, then you have a different tonality. And personally, I think that's one of the healing factors of doing mindfulness practice. So because of all these different aspects, I am very interested in tonality because I also connect them to the Brahma Vihara, to the 4 special qualities. Though I don't, Venerable Analayo, don't agree with my analysis here. Personally, I think actually the Brahma Vihara is one way to cultivate the tonality in an insightful way without grasping. So with metta, loving kindness, and with mudita, appreciative joy, you are cultivating pleasant tonality without grasping. With compassion, that's where Analayo doesn't agree with me. You are cultivating being with unpleasant tonality in a way which you don't grasp. And then with equanimity, you are creatively engaging with neither. So then I have all these things together now. And so that's what I did with Vedana. And that's why I am very interested in it. And then the final point about Vedana, in terms of meditation practice, I found that whenever I do it, and whenever I teach it, I guide it, at the end of it, most of the time, people feel like a kind of a deepening of the practice. Because actually, for me, Vedana is not something which is abstract. It's not about analysis, but it's about actually deepening our experience to be right now. And if you do this, in a way, you go more into the experience, less in thinking about the experience or commenting on the experience, but you're really with what is going on. I am hearing a sound. What is going on? I am feeling a sensation. What is going on inside it? And in terms of deepening the practice, I think that it really makes us experience a different type, actually, of calm and clarity.
Thank you, Martine. That's very interesting, and it is interesting to see how there is a tendency that I think many meditators have, that I have, that many students of the suttas have, to sort of see Vedana as a very simple thing. It's a sort of trinary, right? Pleasant, unpleasant, or sort of in the middle. So this idea of exploding that category out into these more nuanced varieties seems like a very fruitful line of inquiry. So I'm glad someone is making that inquiry. So can I ask a very quick follow-up on that? And then someone has a question that I'd like to send your way. In terms of how to implement this in our sitting practice, how should we incline the mind toward Vedana, or how should we apply mindfulness is not quite the right way of saying it, but how should we be mindful of Vedana? Because one thing that I sometimes find is that if I look deliberately for Vedana, oh, what's the Vedana I'm experiencing right now? It can sort of squish it in a sense, or there's this sense in which suddenly I can't see it anymore, or it sometimes feels like something that can only be seen out of the corner of the eye. And if looked at too closely, it sort of decoheres and becomes hard to see as such. It's not very graspable. And so I know some of my Tibetan teachers might say something like, oh, well, you're just seeing its emptiness. You're just seeing the emptiness of all phenomena. But I'm curious what you think about that, and how you suggest that we, in a very practical way, when we're sitting in meditation, how do we incline the mind, or how do we intend in such a way as to be mindful of Vedana skillfully?
Okay, so the way I would suggest is that you first do it, let's say you do it with the breath, and then you're just aware of the breath coming in, coming out. Just be aware of the sensation. And then with the breath, what you most of the time, unless you're anxious or whatever, most of the time you're going to experience neither. But you just go in the experience of the sensation, that's all. And you're not looking for something specific. That's what we have to be careful of, especially if it's neither, you won't find something specific. If you want specific, then you have to do it in daily life. You look at a beautiful painting, you hear a bird, you see something dirty, then you really see something quite specific. But of course, if you stay with it, this is what is interesting, because you see, okay, so first let me go through the different anchors, and then I will go into the Vipassana aspect of it. So with the breath, just be with that sensation, the air coming in, coming out, just how does it feel? And just be with the sensation. Then with the body, you can experience just a sensation of contact, hand on each other, or air on the skin, or the buttocks on the cushion, etc. And just notice, again, neither. Just be there. But then you have a sensation. And then you go into the sensation, and generally immediately the sensation is going to be possibly a little unpleasant, or it will be a little cool, it will be a little pleasant. But then if you stay with the sensation and you don't do anything with it, then this is what becomes interesting, to bring impermanence and vipassana into it. So if you have a sensation and immediately there is a little bit of Vedana there, a little pleasant, a little unpleasant, when the sensation goes, does the tonality goes with the sensation, or does it remain? Is there an echo of it or not? If you have a sensation which continues, you go inside the sensation, and does the tonality of the first contact remain the same? Does it become up, or does it go down? Again, observe. Same with the sound. Sounds are, what is good with sound, especially if there is bird and different thing, is that it's again a little more specific. So if you hear a sound, for example, you hear the sound of a bird, tweet, 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 it's pleasant. Then the sound goes. Does the tonality goes with the sound, or does the tonality echoes or not? Or if you have a sound which continues, so you have a sound which continues, and then does the tonality remain the same? Does it become nicer? Does it go up? Does it go down? Just notice that. Then the last one, which you can play with if you want to, in terms of the sound, it's with perception. You see, you're sitting, and I would not necessarily recommend it for Noah because of the kind of innervation. But otherwise, you, for example, if I open my window, then I will hear cars. And so part of me could say, because you see, you have to see then the next thing you, not so in meditation, but in daily life. Vedana, what is bias focused on? Bias come from Vedana. This is very interesting in terms of that. So anyway, you hear the sound of the car. So during the pandemic, you did not have so many cars. I would hear the car, and I would know, I would perceive, they're going somewhere and they're being essential workers. And that colored the tonality. And but that we will see more in daily life. We will see more in daily life. And that's why the Brahma Viharas are going to alter our perception. And that's going to alter the tonality. So that's what I would recommend generally, is kind of be at the point of contact, the breath, the sound, the body, sensation. And then the next thing is to look at the duration. And then if you want to have a little exercise, this is a little exercise I recommend. Okay, you sit somewhere and you have something which is pleasant, neutral, and unpleasant. And then you look at each first for just 3 seconds. Then you look at each for 5 seconds. And then you look at each for 15 seconds. And you check, does the Vedana change with time, with duration?
This is very inspiring to me, Martine. I'm very excited to make Vedana, or to invite Vedana to be more and more a part of this Vipassana practice, because you really are painting a picture of this, in a sense, ever-present opportunity to sort of be right at the incipient moment of habit, of reaction, of craving, of insight potentially. There's so much happening at that junction point of Vedana that it does deserve it very much deserves this closer look and this deeper mindfulness. So I'm excited to do it. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these practices. That was very practical.
One last thing, which will be about daily life.
Yes.
In daily life, most of the time, I hope you are okay. So let's say you're generally neither or pleasant 1, 2. I mean, one of the things with Vedana is that it will expand the range of pleasant, but I don't have the time to go into that. But what is very interesting in terms of the practice is to notice when suddenly it changes. I feel relatively okay, and then suddenly, oops, I don't feel okay. I feel, what's going on? What contact, what trigger? And then it kind of become very interesting to see, oh, this is a little unpleasant. And then what do you do with that? And then again, you can have light, habitual, intense. But if you're more interested in this, if you go on Dharma Seed, I have 3 things around Vedana. There is a talk I gave at a conference, but also there is a Dharma talk, a guided meditation, and an instruction on Vedana.
Not only will I check them out, but I think I will probably link to them in our Sitheads group chat for anyone who was here or wasn't here. Maybe people want to explore it together. So thank you. Excellent. I have so many more questions, but I'm going to restrain myself because other people have questions as well. So here's a question that was sent to me to ask on the person's behalf. Let's see. Could you please outline the practice of meditative questioning? In particular, if I wanted to do a sit today, what would I start doing? Also, what benefits come from it over time?
So here, if you talk about what I did when I was in Korea, what I did for 10 years intensely, which I think the questioning in Korea, I found was very complementary with the meditation practice in the mindfulness tradition. So personally, I don't see it as opposed. I see them as complementary. But for 10 years, I did that's all they taught anyway. I just did questioning. But what you have to see in Korea, the way it's taught, it's really a practice of questioning. It is not a practice of answering. That I think is very important. And this is one of the easiest practice you can do. You just sit there, have your eyes half open if you can, and just silently, inwardly, you just ask, what is this? What is this? And if possible, you try to locate it in the belly. So you kind of really feel your belly, and then you try to ask a question from the belly, what is this? What is this? But what is very important is that you're not looking for an answer. What you're trying to develop is a sensation of questioning. So that so much so that over time, you don't have to bring the words of the question so much, but just have that sensation of questioning. And so you could say that the word are what is this, but the most important part of the question is a question mark. And so what struck me in terms of mindfulness practice when I met it was the fact that this questioning practice fits the same model of doing samatha and vipassana together. So the samatha is that you will come back to the question again and again. And when you come back to the question, you come back to the whole moment. And at the same time, it's not a mantra. You're not repeating what is this, what, no, you're really asking, what is this? And so the vipassana aspect is this questioning. So questioning without looking for an answer. But I would not say, like any practice is not for everybody. So some people love to do this. Just sit there and ask, what is this? And it's like throwing the question into the moment without defining anything in it. So you would say it's kind of like a key to open to the moment, to this whole multi-perspectival experience without identifying or grasping at any of it. And at the same time, some people, they might be sitting there and do, what is this? What is this? And why I'm asking this stupid question? If you feel that way, don't do it. It's just one method among many. Some people, they do the question, and a bit the same as with metta, by reciting phrases, they introduce some thought, and then it's kind of lead to more thinking. Again, if it leads to more thinking, don't do it, do something else. Some other people, they do this question, and actually this question is really about, in a way, uncertainty, being able to be with uncertainty. And so if one is a little anxious by nature, then that might make them a little anxious. So I would say, don't do it very much. Do more like the breath, and time to time, drop the question once or twice. In terms of what I find interesting about this practice, it's really about cultivating brightness and calmness together. And one of the things often with the meditation is that people go more toward the samatha because that is more obvious to do. And the vipassana is less done because, how do I do vipassana? And there are so many ways to do it, in a way. And so here it's combining kind of focusing and questioning together. And if it suits the person, I think it's actually will help us very much in terms of brightness, in terms of flexibility. That I would say is a bit its characteristics.
And would you say that if a person has a practice, like say someone's a vipassana meditator, in certain circles, especially these days more and more, I think people are sort of cross-training. They're learning from multiple traditions. They're practicing in different styles. They'll rotate through styles at different times. Do you see meditative questioning as something that one might beneficially add to a practice, peel off a little bit of time to occasionally do meditative questioning every now and then, or a short time every day along with their vipassana practice? Or is it a thing to go all in on if you're going to do it? If you're going to do it, make it your main practice and focus just on that, as you would in a Zen monastery, for instance.
I think it's only, if it speaks to you specifically, then you could just do that. But personally, not necessarily. I think what we can do all is see all these practices as complementary and as being more, is as a little kind of specific aspect. The breath, for example, is calming. The sound is really, for me, opening, cultivating receptivity. The body, it's grounding. The Brahma Vihara, it's cultivating different quality. And this questioning is cultivating brightness and flexibility. So personally, I don't think that they're opposed. But at the same time, you don't want to make it too complicated. But it seems to me that if one is a long-term practitioner, over time, most people do their own thing, it seems to me. And generally, they do a bit of this, a bit of that, but not as I intend to do it. It just happens by itself. So I think, in a way, when we practice, it's like we can decide, oh, I am going to do loving kindness meditation, or I'm going to do vipassana meditation in this way, or whatever, or questioning in this way. And then you decide to do it for a week, for a month, forever, whatever. Or personally, I think if we have practiced for a while, then it's like we trust the samatha, we trust the vipassana, we trust the caring and careful attention we've developed. And then we let the attention does its job. I mean, that's what I do most of the time, I must say. And so personally, what I do is generally a bit of the breath, possibly a bit of the sound, with generally a bit of questioning, but without engineering it. It just happens by itself. So I think it's always kind of like the question, you know, do I do something intentionally, specifically to train in it? Or is it something which nearly seems to arise naturally? So if you've never done the questioning, yes, you might want a few time to do it, to see, does it speak to me? Does it seem to work? Does it make sense? And then you can, you know, spend a few time just doing it 30 minutes at a time and see what happens. And outside of that, after that, you can let it pop up. So I think it kind of, again, is it intentional or do you let it happen by itself?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for answering that. Are there other questions for Martine to stop me from just asking her an infinite series of questions, which would otherwise happen? Any hands? Oh, hold on a second. Okay, so there is a question. This person just said that it should be a low priority question. They wanted other people to have a chance first. So, all right, I'll go ahead and ask this question on this person's behalf. Martine, what do you think about names and titles? How do you like to be addressed? And do you endorse using titles in professional situations, or does that separate people?
You're not asking the right person. Because you see, I am an ordinary lay person. So personally, I am Martine, and you can pronounce it the way you want. I don't mind. I am Martine Batchelor, and then you can call me Martine, and that's it. So I am nobody special. I am Martine. So why make a fuss about it? I mean, if somebody asks me what I do, I say, okay, I write and I teach meditation. But it's just, for me, it's just a role. It's just a role, you know, and we have different identities. You know, I am a partner, I am a sister, I am a daughter, I am a friend, I am a Dharma friend, I am somebody who sometimes, you know, listen to people in interview, I teach meditation, but I don't see myself as being a Dharma teacher 150% all the time and be called such because this is too much. I mean, I met somebody who was like that, a teacher who was aware all the time and telling you to be aware all the time from breakfast to dinner. I must say, I found it very tiring and was happy when she left. So personally, I don't need titles, but of course, I was trained in the tradition. So of course, if I meet a monk or a nun, I will bow. I will always bow. If I go into the Buddha hall, I will do 3 bows to the statue of the Buddha. I will bow to the monks if they I will bow to the monks or the nun anyway, three times if this is the right thing to do. And then, of course, I will call them venerable and respect their title. And of course, I don't know, if somebody wants to, if they call the Lama something, I will call them Lama something, if that they're the way they want to be called. But yeah, let's say I am I'm a very ordinary person, and who does not think much. It's not that I don't think much, but I think one has to be careful with title. And more than that, I think one has to be careful with lineages. I am also terrible with that. I don't have any lineages, nobody transmitted to me, and people just asked me to teach because they thought maybe who knows, she knows something. And I am just like a kind of a kalamita. I see myself as a kalyamita, like the Buddha says. If nobody asks you anything, don't say anything. If somebody asks you something, then you have to share in whatever way you can help them. But to me, what would be more important than lineages and title would be practice, but not only practice. Is a practice making a difference in daily life? To me, this is, I mean, can we become more wise and compassionate? Can we bring our little stone, our little thing in the world that we will be as harmless as we can and beneficial to the degree we can? So that would be my take on that. And then Renee, who know how to use a hand as a question. Renee? If you pronounce it that way.
Hey? Did you call me? I can understand you.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
Am I supposed to comment or I don't know.
Renee, we thought you had a question because your hand is up.
Yeah, it's more of a comment.
Sure. Let's go for the comment.
All right. You're talking about how we want to be addressed. I'm very sensitive. I don't like to be addressed as ma'am. I know it's respectful for younger people, but I just don't like it. I prefer even from younger children to call me Renee. And I do cringe, witch with a capital B is not tolerated. And all these other swear words and descriptions that people come out of people's mouth, I find disgusting. And I've got to start just walking away from people talking behind my back. And it really doesn't matter. I don't care. But if you can't say it to my front of me, don't think you could say it at the back of me. And that's what I wanted to comment on. Okay? Thank you.
No, I think in terms of that, like if we talk about how do we like to be addressed?
Yeah.
And also very much how do people talk with each other? And I think, of course, what is very important is to respect each other. And so in a way, it's kind of like, that's why nowadays people ask about the pronoun and ask, how do you want your name? What's the proper pronunciation of your name and thing of that nature, because we really are trying to see the person and not see the person through us. This is a little to me, part of the practice is that it helps us to see equally myself and others, but others for themselves. So in a way, it's true. How do people want to be called? And so some people might want to have certain title, which I think is totally fine. Like on Twitter, you have lots of ladies talking about how lots of male professors are called doctors, but ladies won't be called doctors, even though if they have a PhD. So they're asking on Twitter that, people respect their title. And I can understand that, that you want, they're not saying, look at me, I'm fantastic, but they're saying, I want to be equally respected. I want to be equally respected for my experience. So I think in terms of that, yes. And then after that, it's kind of always a little, how do we approach if somebody calls us ma'am or whatever it might be, and then how can we say to the person, oh, I would prefer if you call me Renee. Mm-hmm. What is wonderful in England, now they do it less, but in England, it's kind of interesting culturally, what people will call you and how they will be familiar with you and not. Everybody is so different in each country. Mm-hmm. In England, people call you love all the time, and you think, oh, really? I'm your love? And it's kind of, that's that's kind of the way they talk. So I I would not question it in a way. And the same that if people kind of, pronounce my name in a funny way, personally, I don't mind, but I can understand if people do not make the effort to pronounce somebody's name correctly, then to respect that. And the person to ask, oh, can you pronounce it, please, in this way? That's the right pronunciation. So I think it's kind of like, how can we relate to each other? And how can we relate to each other so that we can be heard and we can be respected? And then it kind of will be a little, I think also according to different culture, of course. Having lived in different culture, and it's kind of interesting what is required and what is not required. To me, this is also what listening is about, kind of what is the culture. I mean, in what was very striking for me as a French person, who also lived in Korea, but in Korea, I was in a lower status. And in Korea, it's so fascinating because if you're lower status, because I was young, and then you have to speak a more complicated language when the higher status people speak to you in a simpler language. And it's very impolite to say something to somebody higher in a simple language, but you learn by hearing. And this is really interesting to kind of, how you navigate the difference, the hierarchy and the way you have to speak to people. And it's the same coming from France to England. And in France, you're generally direct, help me, I need help. When in England, you have to say, oh, please, do you mind? Could you, if you could find the time possibly to help me, it would be so nice. And so the first time I said to somebody, help me, they did not help me. And I could not understand why. And then I was told, you have to put more language in it. And then I just adapted, because why not? That's what works within this culture. So I think there is also kind of respecting the culture and how we also adapt, and how also as individual within that culture, we are more this way or we're more that way. I think it's kind of a complicated subject, actually, but an interesting one.
Mm-hmm. How many times people, they give you the name, and then a minute, not even later, her name is forgotten. And I always say, I didn't remember your name, but I don't forget you.
Very nice, very nice. Good way, skillful way.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Martine. I want to be mindful of the time because we're getting close to the hour mark. So this was wonderful. As you can see in the chat on the Slack, people have really found this to be very beneficial. We're so delighted to have you, Martine. And Martine, is there anything that you want to say before we say goodbye? And I'll just say that I hope you'll join us again sometime, because I was absolutely, I loved this. So I hope you'll come back. But anything you want to say before we wrap up?
It's so nice to meet you all, though I was not able to see you all, but nice that you come and join. And of course, I'll be happy to meet you again and chat with you again. But keep well, keep well.
Thank you, Martine. Have a wonderful evening. Take care, and I hope we'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Martine. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John Middling.